This week, instead of reading a chapter from my book, I have here a few questions, and I would like to answer them. They are from a young lady in Florida. Her name is Sahara, and she comes from the Palm Beach Public Elementary School, and has sent me the following questions. The first one is, what was the best time you had with Eleanor Roosevelt when you were 10 years old, like me? And thinking about it, I think the most exciting time I had with my aunt when I was 10, and my aunt Eleanor and her husband Franklin Roosevelt were living in the White House because he was the president then of the United States. And so it was fun for me to go from Boston, where I lived, and to visit my Aunt Eleanor, because she had 5 children. I was just the age of their youngest one, but it was always fun to be with them because they'd been brought up in New York City, and they were just full of life, and there were 5 of them, and they were arguing, and they were involved in their own schools and in their friends. And I felt like a sort of a country bumpkin from Boston, where we didn't just express ourselves quite as vehemently as my cousins, the Roosevelts, did. They had the idea that if they spoke loudly enough, they'd get their point across and they'd win the argument. And so when 3 or 4 of her sons would get together and start arguing about anything, it was easy to find an argument, their voices would get louder and louder, and finally their mother, my Aunt Eleanor, would interrupt and say, "Now everybody be quiet. When you speak very loudly, maybe you think you're making your point, but I think it would be better to listen to what other people are saying." The next question is to ask me, was my aunt ever funny? And I do have to say, I don't think she had a sense of humor, in a subtle way anyway, but she did love to laugh, and she could easily laugh at herself, but it was usually circumstantial situations that made her laugh. If she had worn the wrong skirt or forgotten her hat, she would laugh at herself, and it was contagious, but it wasn't very thoughtful. It was just a situational sense of humor, I think. What was my Aunt Eleanor's most famous public appearance that I witnessed? And I think it was one inaugural parade after my Uncle Franklin had been elected president for the 2nd time. And they had always a parade down the avenue that leads from the capital of Washington, D.C. to the White House. And she always walked beside the car where my uncle would be riding. He had had polio and he couldn't walk. how do our peacemakers inspire us? How did your aunt inspire you? That's me. But I was young. I was only 10 years old. She, who was very tall and willowy, would always lean over and ask me a question and listen to the answer. She just, no matter who you were instantly invited by her whole concentration on you and wanting to know your answer, that you were inspired by her without any further words. She was just so interested in you that you got the feeling if you had questions to ask, or if you had things you hoped she could help you solve, that you could ask her. And she would certainly do her best to help you if she could.